We're talking to Red Jones, umpire in the American League in the 40s, and Red had a reputation for being one of the most colorful men in the game. And a lot of people, Red, are interested in knowing just exactly why any man in his right mind would want to become an umpire.
Well, Al, I tried to play baseball. I wasn't good enough. I couldn't hit. And when you can't hit, you might as well forget it. I could bang that ball to all corners of the infield, but I couldn't get it up and away into orbit. And I was advised by club owners and teammates, coaches, managers. They said, Red, we love you. We want you with us, but seek some other phase of the game. Take up tickets, sell tickets. But don't come back down here. You don't help us. It was hard to get through to me. I had a burning desire to play ball. And just like the grass, perennially I would show up, try to make this ball club. And finally the message got through. One day the manager tossed me a mitt in an exhibition game, and he said, Jones, go out and relieve Stewart at first base. I grabbed the mitt, started out. He turned to the coach, said, what's the score? The coach said, 10-2, 8th inning, Skipper, we're behind. And the manager said, sit down, Red, we're not giving up yet. And one time they told me I'd been traded. I said, for whom? Where am I going? He said, for nobody. It's an even-up trade, and we think it'll strengthen our ball club. What Branch Rickey calls strength by subtraction. Get that bum down the road, and we're a better ball club. And one fella suggested umpiring. He said, Red, take up umpiring. You can go as long as your legs and your eyes hold out. Well, you see what happened to the eyes. The legs are still pretty good, but I had fastball glasses and curveball glasses. I had to change between pitches. And there happened to be a left-hand pitcher on the ball club that met with the same misfortune that I met with. He couldn't throw a curveball. I couldn't hit it. So I figured we had something in common. And he latched on to me and decided he would become an umpire. The only trouble was he had defective vision. He was cross-eyed. I guess you would say he was cockeyed, because I've heard guys on the bench say that old Lefty could watch a tennis match and never move his head. He'd sit right there and watch it. So I didn't have guts enough, Al, to refuse him. If he wanted to go out there and umpire, I had nerve enough to go with him. Now, this goes back a few years. This is 1931. The first depression that I remember was descending upon the country. There was no money, and I'd umpire for sustenance, pea soup and jelly cake, a big orange, anything. And one afternoon, Bruce Dudley, the general manager of the Louisville club, offered me $5 to umpire balls and strikes. They wouldn't let Lefty go behind the plate. He had the base umpire. So I said, okay, you got a deal. I said, how about Lefty? Can I bring him along? He said, yeah, bring Lefty. I said, 5? He said, no, 2.5. We don't have the money. I said, he won't come for 2.5. He's got a lot of pride. He thinks he's worth as much as I am, and I do too. He said, well, present the proposition, and if he wants to come, we'll use him. If not, we'll put a pitcher over at third, another ball player over at first, and when they can call the plays on the bases, and you can work balls and strikes. So I said, all right, let me go back to the boarding house, not the hotel now. Times are tough. I went back to the boarding house and told Lefty about the offer, and he's mad as he can be. He's insulted. And I said, well, come on and go. Somebody might see us and give us a shot in organized ball. Come on, Lefty, don't be too proud. So I prevailed upon him, and he reluctantly accepted. We went out. Everything went splendidly for about 5 innings until some guy slid into second base that was as safe as if he's in an armored truck. He's standing on the bag, dusting himself off. The baseman touched him with the ball. Lefty said, you're out! And the runner wheeled on him and said, what kind of lousy umpiring is that? He said, the best you'll ever see for 2.5 a game.
Red, you went on and worked for a brewery after a while, didn't you, Red?
Yeah, the only connection that I want to bring out about having worked for a brewery and umpired practically all my life is the fact that I had a hell of a lot more fun hustling the full ones than I had ducking the empties.
Red, one of your most unusual experiences when you worked, after you got out of Major League umpiring, you went over to Jackson Prison and umpired a game. Now, how does a prison game work?
Well, it was on Sunday afternoon, was for the playoff. All the candy. They had a split season, and the winners of the first half were going to play the winners of the second half. And the distributor in Jackson, Michigan, where the southern Michigan prison is located, was a friend of the warden. And this is the big game. And those fellas are going to bet a little bit. They bet razor blades, cigarettes, cigarette papers, matches, and one thing. And they wanted a man of integrity and honesty. They don't trust everybody, you know. So they wanted me to come up and umpire the final game for all the marbles. And I'm there, ready to call play ball. Each team has completed its fielding practice, its hitting practice, and I'm ready for the first pitch. But the catcher decides that he wants to have a final word with the pitcher. And he goes out to the pitcher's mound to talk. And standing in the batter's box was a little fellow about the size of Phil Rizzuto, a small guy. And he's got a friendly face, looking up at me and smiling. And I looked down at him. I said, "What they got you in here for, Shorty?" He said, "For killing a big guy about your size."
Red, one of the most serious men in all of Major League Baseball has to be Ted Williams. I mean, he took the game seriously. Before he became the manager of the Washington Senators, he wrote his memoirs for Sports Illustrated magazine. And he alluded to the fact that the funniest thing that ever happened to him in baseball was an incident with the Chicago White Sox in which you were the plate umpire. He said he couldn't tell the story. Can you tell the story now?
Why did he say he couldn't tell it? You were on television, weren't you? You think we can get by with it?
Let's try, Red. What happened?
Right. Well, here we go. There had been a beanball epidemic over in the National League. Every time the Cubs met the Giants or the Dodgers met the Giants, they would throw at each other, and they were throwing for keeps. When you throw behind the man, that's where you really mean it. So there was a fellow by the name of Joe Haynes pitching for the White Sox, and Williams is at bat with two men on. And Haynes is Joe Cronin's brother-in-law, who managed the Red Sox, or was president of the Red Sox at that time. Ted Lyons was managing the White Sox, and in comes the pitch to Williams. And I don't think he tried to decapitate old Ted, but he singed his eyebrows, you know, right there. And I didn't say anything, but Williams is laying out on the ground about 4 feet from home plate, rocking on his shoulder blade. And he gets up and gets back in the batter's box, and here comes the same type of pitch. Zing! Right under his chin. So I walk out to the mound, and I don't say a word. And Haynes says, "I ain't throwing at him." I said, "Who said you were? But don't do it again." So I walked back, and on the next pitch, Williams hit the ball into back bay, right out of the park. And Ted Lyons walked out to the mound, and he's fiddle-footing around, giving a guy a chance to warm up down in the bullpen. And I walk out. After about 2 minutes, I walk out. I said, "Are you going to change pitchers?" He said, "It's all your fault. You disconcerted my pitcher." I said, "If I did, he disconcerts mighty easily. I didn't have that bat in my hand." And he said, "Yeah, I'm changing." I said, "Well, let's get the man in here and get along with the game." So I went back to umpire balls and strikes behind the plate, and just as soon as I took my position, pulled the chest protector up on, you know, that big inflated windbag that they wear in the American League, I am in position, and I hear from the dugout, "Meathead! Meathead!" And it deteriorates fast. It really gets bad, you know. And I called Lyons out of the dugout. I said, Ted, now that stuff's got to stop. It's the second inning, and here it's ladies' day to boot, and all that profanity and obscene language can't be. I'm not going to tolerate that. I said, it's your ball club, your responsibility. Now let's stop it. He said, you stop it. You started it. I said, okay, we'll start with you. Get the hell out of here. I thought that would nip it in the bud, you know, and I'd have no trouble. But I went back again, and here comes the voices. And it's tough to look into a dugout and determine who's hollering. And here I can hear it. Ah, you lousy meat. Yeah. So I said, come on, let's go. The first three there, on the end, let's go. You're out of the game. And they left. And I went back to umpire again, and here it comes again, the same thing. By that time, Summers has moved over. Bill Summers has moved over towards the dugout, and he said, which three you want now, Red? I said, give me the three in the middle. And they left. And finally, this continues. It goes on for about 20 minutes. And finally, all of them have been chased. I get the rest of them, all of them. It's on the bench. I said, come on, let's go. I ain't gonna have all this stuff going on all afternoon. And the last guy to leave is Wally Moses. And he's a friend of mine. We went to school together. And as he passes by, he said, Red, what are you running me for? He said, you know, you and I are good friends. I never said anything to you. I said, I realize that, Wally. I didn't think you said anything, but you just got in bad company. And you know how the police do when they raid those houses of ill repute and the pool rooms? The guys that are sitting around have to go with the bad. The good guys go with the bad. Yeah. And the last word I said to him, today I'm raiding. Go on, Wally, get out.
But Red, it didn't stop there. It didn't stop.
No,
even though the
that's
bench
right.
was cleared.
The bench was cleared. I go back. I know now that I'm not going to have any trouble. I go back, get in position, and the voice comes from the dugout. There isn't a soul, there isn't a face in the dugout. And I'm astounded. I'm amazed. I walk over, and the Chicago White Sox wear a long windbreaker, right down almost to the ankles, because in the springtime, that wind off of Lake Michigan and in Boston, it's very cold. And they had one of these long windbreakers hanging on a nail in the corner of the dugout. And I walked into that dugout, and here are 2 feet protruding from one of those big windbreakers. And I grabbed the coat off the nail, and there's Mule Haas all crouched up in the corner. And Summers, Bill Summers, said, if you'd have nailed him in the beginning, it wouldn't have been any trouble. I said, well, why the heck didn't you tell me? He said, I was enjoying it too. My partner. And the only guy that got fined out of the 14 was Bing Miller. As he went by, he offered me his glasses. He took, and someone took a picture, and it appeared in the Chicago paper, and Mr. Harridge fined him $25 for showing up an umpire. But when we got to the hotel, there was a message to call Mr. Harridge immediately. And he asked, why did you chase 14 Chicago White Sox out of the game today, Red? I said, because 13 is unlucky. And he fined me $50 for insubordination. I lost $25 on the deal. Miller got fined 25, I got fined 50.
Red, one of the things I've noticed in a ballpark is that the catcher very seldom turns and wheels on an umpire on a ball or a strike pitch. But I have watched carefully, and you can see the masks bobbing as if they're talking. Is there some kind of an unwritten rule that he can speak as long as he doesn't turn around and confront you directly?
Yes, Al, more of a custom, I guess you would say. It's not a rule, but they're prohibited from doing it. It's just the code of the game, you know, the umpire's secret weapon, because they don't allow the catcher to turn around and yak face on, because they know that he's violently disagreeing with your decision. Then you, instead of one guy, you've got 40,001 or 50,001. Everybody joins in to take the part of the catcher. And they don't turn around, but the air gets blue. They question your eyesight and immediately get into your ancestry, you know. I had one fella insinuate one afternoon that there hadn't been a marriage in my family for 3 generations. He had to go, you know. But usually it's, usually they remain within the law. And one afternoon we've got a catcher out here. We're in Tiger Stadium. It was Briggs Stadium at that time. A fellow by the name of Robinson. And he was sort of a high-type moron. You know, we all thought that we were a think ahead of him. And Newhouser is pitching, Harold Newhouser, and evidently had a sore arm in the latter part of his career, and they had given him a shot of Novocaine or something, and he's just goosing the ball up to the plate, and it's not holding up. It falls below the line of demarcation, below the knee, about that far, about 3 or 4 inches. And I call the pitch a ball, and old Robbie throws it back and said, "What the hell was wrong with that one?" And I said, "I didn't like it, that's all. There's 40,000 people here, and I'm the only one you have to please. And I don't explain them, I just call them." And the next pitch comes in, I call it a ball. He throws it back to Newhouser, and he said, "Well, we'll never win today with that kind of umpiring." Said, "We might as well go in and take a shower. We're through." And I don't pay any attention to him. Next pitch comes in, same identical spot, right below the knee. I rule that pitch a ball. He throws it back to Harold, and he said, he's got 3 kids. I'm trying to pay off a mortgage. You're stealing us blind. What the heck do I care about their personal problems? All I want to do is get the ball game over and go down and have a cold one and enjoy myself. So finally they get the side out, and up comes Robbie. He's a leadoff man, good hitter, cleanup man. Second inning he steps in, and the White Sox have got a pretty good left-handed pitcher, a blonde boy by the name of Edgar Smith, and he dropped the first one in on old Robbie right where Newhouser was pitching, right below the knee. And I said, "Strike!" Robbie turned around and said, "Huh? What? Huh?" He said, "That pitch is a ball." I said, "That's what I've been telling you all afternoon."
Red, you have always said that you didn't mind getting needled as long as they were clever.
That's right.
And one of the men who was a great needler was Paul Richards when he was a catcher. He is now the general manager at Atlanta. And he could come up with some pretty interesting comments, couldn't he?
Had the most vitriolic tongue I've ever encountered, on or off the ball field. We had so many arguments, Richards and myself. Everyone thought we were married. You couldn't call one to please him. And he must have lain awake at night thinking of new names for the umpires. You know, I never saw a man. And he would lose control of himself. He come up with one of the best I've ever heard. It knocked me over because I thought I'd heard everything. He was catching for the Tigers one afternoon, and they were battling for the pennant. It was in 1945. They played the Cubs in the World Series, and there was a man on third base, a visiting runner on third base, and a routine fly ball hit to the outfield, and the runner tagged up and tried to score. And the play at the plate is close. Richards made a hell of a play. He had to go up the first base side, get the ball, made a dive back, and he tagged the hind leg. The front leg is across, see? And he split there, laying on the ground, and I make my decision and call the runner safe, and he looks up and sees me with my palms down, and he really goes nuts. He threw the mask down towards third base. The mitt goes towards first. He reaches up, and he's taking off his chest protector, and I said, and he's blaspheming. He's really, oh, man, the language. And I said, keep stripping, baby. You know you're out of the game. Pull it all off. Come off with the shin guards, everything. He said, Oh, you put me out? I said, sure, you're through. He said, well, everything I said goes double, and you are a revolving sob. I said, now, wait a minute. Before you go, I said, I thought I'd heard all. But tell me, what is this revolving sob? He said, any way you turn, you won.
Red, I've been to many sports banquets, and a story has been told several times. They always change the name of the batter who comes up to the plate in the story. But in all honesty, they never changed the name of the umpire who made this little speech. He is always Red Jones. And the story has been told by many people, and I know that you were the umpire behind the plate, but the real batter in this instance was a fellow by the name of Chuck Hostetler. Is that right?
That's true. Correct. Happened in Yankee Stadium, 1944 and 1945. I forget the date. But the Tigers were in the thick of the pennant race both years. And Atlee Donald starts for the Yankees, and Harold Newhouser starts for the Tigers. Apparently, Newhouser hadn't warmed up enough, or maybe his arm was troubling him a little bit. But the Yankees jumped on him and got 2 runs in the first inning. He settled down and didn't get another run. Detroit hadn't scored. Come the 8th inning for Detroit to come to bat. And the first 2 hitters up get on base, and it's Newhouser's turn at bat. And, of course, the play calls for a sacrifice. And Harold attempts to bunt, and both attempts roll foul. Now, it's a hot, humid day there, too. And Steve O'Neill, the manager, decides that Newhouser might hit the ball on the ground on the 3rd strike or 3rd swing. And he puts in Chuck Hostetler, an outfielder, a utility man that he had. Great big fella, friendly, had a big smile. The opposing teams always referred to him as Melon Puss. He had a big grin. And they were hollering after Hostetler came in, giving him the rib. So Hostetler is announced. It goes over the loudspeaker. And Hostetler batting for Newhouser. And I turned to him and I said, Charlie, you have to assume the count that Newhouser had. There are 2 strikes on you. And he said, tell him to flop him on in here, Red. I was born that way.
But you know, Red, everyone tells that story. Some make the batter in that instant Yogi Berra. But no one ever tells what Hostetler did with the pitch when it was delivered with the 2 strikes on him.
He doubled and scored both runners.
No.
They had put a fast man in to run for the catcher who had walked, and both runners scored. And the Tigers eventually won the ball game in around the 14th inning.
That's the first time I've ever heard the end of that story. You're talking about Yankee Stadium, the price of fame and autograph seeking. You tell a story, Red, of Hank Greenberg and Rudy York when they played with the Tigers, being besieged by autograph seekers in New York City one time. And with them was a rather unknown catcher at the time.
Yeah, that's right. They were leaving the stadium, and Bob Swift accompanied them. And as they went out to Players Gate, they were surrounded by these youngsters and wanting the autographs of Greenberg and York. Mm-hmm. And they signed, and they said, here's a promising young catcher, Bob Swift. He's joined our ball club, and he's bound to become a star someday. Don't you want his autograph? They said, we'll wait.
Red, you got to know, and it's unfortunate you didn't get to know him sooner, Satchel Paige. There's so many Satchel Paige stories, and we really don't know how many are true or not true. The man's a legend in his own time. But you did work a game when Satchel Paige pitched in the majors, didn't you?
That's true. He was in the 48 season and was very instrumental in Cleveland winning the pennant that year, which necessitated a playoff game to determine the winner of the American League pennant between the Red Sox. And you can put it together, Al, and see how vitally important every victory that Satchel had for the Cleveland Club, because it wound up in a tie. The victory, the pennant race did, and they played the Braves in the World Series. And Satchel was pitching great ball, and Cleveland Club went into New York one night and for a makeup game. It was a rained-out affair that they had to be played, and it was the last visit of the Cleveland Club in Yankee Stadium. So Boudreaux, the manager of the Cleveland team, starts a knuckleball pitcher, a left-handed knuckleball pitcher by the name of Bearden, and he goes into the 6th or 7th inning with a 2-run lead. But he wilts. He can't stand the heat, and he loaded the bases, and in the interim he had retired 2 men, and the bases are loaded, and DiMaggio coming up. And Boudreaux comes in from his shortstop position and said, "Page is my pitcher." Now, old Satchel had a psychology of philosophy that if he could nettle or needle a man, he had him half beat. He figured if he could get him in a lather, then he had him on the 5-yard line, and he could get rid of him. And I guess that holds true in any phase of life. You get a guy mad, he's not thinking properly. So when Boudreaux gives me the office that Page is his pitcher, I take out the batting order, strike off Bearden's name, insert Page, and the time consumed until he comes in 12 minutes. I don't know where the hell he was warming up. Down around Times Square, I guess. But DiMaggio is frothing at the mouth. Where is he? Where is he? I want to hit, baby. Bring him in. Bring him in. And everybody is hollering and throwing things, debris. Finally, old Satchel sees that he's got everybody upset, and he comes in. And I walk out to read the riot act to him, and I look him up in the eye. He's 6'4", tall fella. And I said, "Satchel, why in the hell don't you help an umpire out in a situation like this?" I said, "You got everybody in the ballpark mad at me." He said, "What are you bawling me out for, Red?" I said, "Because you ought to come in here when you're called." He said, "Do you see how many men are on base?" I said, "Yeah, the bases are loaded." He said, "Do you see who's hitting?" I said, "Yeah, DiMaggio." He said, "Well, you looking at one fella that never hurries into trouble. Go to hell." And he would get up on the mound and take his pitching position. He would back off and place his outfielders. He'd do that again, and he did it again 3 times. And he had Larry Doby, the center fielder, playing so far back, and he looked like he'd been farmed out. He was 500 feet back in center field. And then he pitches, and DiMaggio runs up, runs back, runs up again in the batter's box, and hits a fly ball to Doby. Doby never moved 500 feet. Right down. And he got him out of the inning and preserved the lead, and he didn't get credit for the victory, but it was certainly a save, a vitally important game.
I think the man you had great respect for, not only as a man but as a pitcher, was Bob Feller. I always thought that Feller had the fastest ball since Walter Johnson. Did you agree? I know you umpired many a game when Feller was the pitcher.
Well, Al, I didn't see Walter Johnson. You date me a little bit.
Yeah.
Back. I'll have to take the record book. I think the record books will back him up. But Feller had the fastest pitch that I've ever seen. I've never seen Denny McLean down on the ball field. I know Virgil Trucks, Allie Reynolds, and all those guys were considered to be fast. But Feller, on his good day, he could throw a strawberry through a battleship. And his curveball looked like an epileptic snake. And he used it as a weapon. He would just frighten hell out of a hitter with the curveball with no intent of getting it over the plate. And then he would lay that fastball in. And I remember a little guy hitting against him the first time he'd ever seen him. He's at bat Sunday afternoon, leading off of the Red Sox. They recalled him for the Louisville club, and Feller wore a size of 15.5 shoe, and he would stick that foot in your face and come with the glove, and then with that overhand fastball, and the ball would come out of the white background, and 15 feet before you could pick it up. And this kid was standing there, and here come one right down the gut, see? And I said, "Strike?" And the kid turned around and said, "My God, Umps, you didn't call that pitch a strike, did you?" I said, "Pecker high, right down the middle. Kid, didn't you think it was a strike?" He said, "It sounded high to me."
Red?
Al, I said, you know, we umpire for that gentleman sometimes like that. We call those balls by sound. I said, now I'll give you a little tip. You keep listening, and if your hearing improves, you're liable to turn out to be a hell of a hitter.
You had a friend, well, I use the term loosely, Don Calloway, who used to needle you unmercifully, Red, and he had a time with Feller one time with that curveball of Feller's, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. Score is about 10-2, ninth inning, and Calloway, he hated all umpires. He thought they should have been strangled in their crib. He didn't think no umpires should have been allowed to live, especially Jones. And umpires get tired of that, you know, that whining and begging and singing a lullaby and an alibi and everything. So Calloway is at bat, and Billy McGowan is behind the plate. And Feller breaks off that curveball, and it nearly got old Calloway. He fell back away from the plate, just frightened the heck out of him. And he's laying, rocking on his shoulder blades, and the ball is outside about 6 or 8 inches, but McGowan figures, I got him. He's laying out there. He don't know where the pitch is. And he said, strike! And true to fashion, true to form, Calloway got up and lodged a beef. He said, my God, Mac, you didn't call that pitch a strike, did you? McGowan said, why, sure, it got part of the plate. Calloway said, it fooled me. McGowan said, it nearly fooled me, but I'm still on my feet.
Wakefield had an experience, too, Dick Wakefield of the Tigers, and you were umpiring.
That's right.
When Feller was using that curve and fastball, too.
Well, the same situation practically. The score is lopsided in favor of Cleveland, and Steve O'Neill put Dick Wakefield in. He'd been in a slight slump, and he put him into a pinch hit, and he's 2 out in the 9th inning, and here comes Wakefield, and Feller breaks him off 2 curveballs. Just beauties right there, see? So I'm kind of playing the game, and I figure, my God, he's not going to put that wear and tear on his arm again with that curve pitch. He'll waste one. I don't think he'll come with the curve again, and I sort of relaxed, you know, friggin' the ball would be outside or inside or under the chin, and a waste ball, you know, W-A-S-T-E.
Yeah.
And I got a little lax in my duties, and Feller come back with a better curve than the first 2. Both of them had been called strikes. And I said, ball? And that Wakefield wheeled on me, and he said, God damn it, Jones, bear down. He said, you're only prolonging the ball game. I can't hit that stuff. Call me out.
I apologize about Walter Johnson.
That's all right.
I know you didn't know Ty Cobb either.
No.
But by all accounts, Ty Cobb and Babe Ruth have to be the 2 greatest names that have ever played baseball. I would have to say that. Cobb was what did he win the batting championship 12 times or so?
A lot of
Tremendous time. But there is a story that you tell, and there's a sports columnist who says that he knows you, Red, very well, and he says this is his favorite story, and it has to do with Ty Cobb and a young pitcher who really thought he could do the job.
I know the story, Al. I happened to speak at Saginaw, Michigan, at a big civic club affair, a combination of the clubs. They had a big crowd, and they introduced this pitcher from the audience. He was an elderly man in his 70s. This has happened several years ago. And this man pitched for Saginaw in the old Central League, and he won 21 and lost 2. He was a left-hander, and he took a bow from the audience and acknowledged that he had that record. Now, this goes back to 1910, 1911, and he was a cocky kind of a guy. So the Central League closes on Labor Day, so there's a month there until the American League season rings the curtain down, and this young fella wrote Huey Jennings, the manager of the Detroit team, a letter and said, quoted his record, of course, and said, I am positive if given a chance I could come down there and strike Cobb out 4 out of 5 times. You just let me pitch, and I'll strike him out 4 out of 5 times. Well, they didn't have time to let him do that, but they were impressed with his letter and his nerve and everything, so they sent for him to come down. and the fielding practice is over and the batting practice is over, and they let this youngster warm up on the sidelines, and Jennings goes out with a bag of balls, and they call Cobb up, and they tell him that they're going to let him pitch 5 balls to Cobb. So he did. He threw the 5 pitches, and on the first 2 pitches, Cobb hit blue darters, frozen ropes, right down the foul line, fair ball, and the chalk flew up. And on the next pitch, he straightened up and pulled it right out to the flagpole in center field, right against the fence. And then, now, on the next 2 pitches, he nearly tears the right field wall down. At least he moved it 2 or 3 inches. And Jennings says, well, there you are, son. He said, there's your 5 pitches. He said, what you got to say for yourself? The kid said, hell, I don't believe that's Cobb.
Another character, and I use the word character because it's an affectionate term, was Bobo Newsom. Now, there was a man who was really, in his own time, people everywhere he went, people laughed.
That's right.
And the big story is how he got the name Bobo.
Because of the fact, Al, excuse me, go ahead.
Well, why did he give him the name Bobo?
Because he called everybody Bobo. Everyone that he came in contact or he talked to, newspaper men, club officials, when he pitched for Philadelphia, even Mr. Mack, he called Mr. Mack Bobo. And when you were in Mr. Mack's presence, you felt like you were in the presence of a saint. He was, what a gentleman, and he never did put on a uniform. He always was in civilian clothes, and I was in spring training with the Philadelphia Ball Club one year when they weren't permitted to, the government put travel restrictions, and the Tigers trained at Lafayette, Indiana, the Yankees at Atlantic City, and the Athletics at Frederick, Maryland. And I'm over there and with those ball players. And we're in a little hotel that's got about 80 rooms. Bobo called it a baseball hotel. I said, what do you mean by baseball hotel, Bobo? He said, the pitcher's on the dresser and the catcher's under the bed.
There's a story when Eddie Yost first came up. He was a bouncy little guy. He was playing third base, and Bobo had a little to do with him, too, about his bounciness.
Yeah, it was Yost's first year in the American League, and as you say, Al, he had all that elasticity in his legs and could bounce like a rubber ball. So Bobo was pitching for Washington, and they're playing Philadelphia, and it's the battle of what of it. You know, the 2 teams are mired in second division. But Bobo had a lot of pride. He wanted to win. And they go into the 7th inning and scoreless tie, and the first 2 Philadelphia men get up, or get on base. And Bobo expects the bunt, and he's pitching outside, and Yosty is running in to get the bunt, and Bobo says, time. And I call time, and Yost, hell, he could shake hands with the hitter. He's just running in there, see? And Bobo says, come here, Bobo, talking to Yosty. He says, you play back now, and you take care of the bag, and old Bobo will take care of this in right around home plate. And he said, I'll cover the ground in here. I'll grab the ball. We'll knock off that lead run. I'll fire it over to you. And he said, incidentally, you've been making me look very bad. You've been beating my fastball into the plate.
Many of the baseball people have off-season occupations. An umpire. Isn't there an umpire as a house detective in the off-season?
Yeah, there was. I don't know whether he still has his job or not. Art Passarella, he was a house detective in Los Angeles. He couldn't find Black Beauty in a field of white mice. But, if there was anything going on, he was in on it, you know. Yeah. He used to say he couldn't run down his heels.
There was another umpire had an avocation. He was an umpire, wasn't he, who was a magician.
Oh, yeah. I worked with him in minor league days in the Alabama State League. A fellow by the name of Frank Tribuca. He was an amateur magician and worked in nightclubs and everything, and always had a deck of cards with him wherever he went. And he was umpiring one day, and he called a pitch a strike. The guy didn't agree with him. Of course, they never do. And old Frank just reached back in the back pocket and come out with a deck of cards and just spread them out there. And he said, told the hitter, said, take a card. And the guy reached in and got one. He said, 7 of hearts. And his hitter said, how the hell did you know that? He said, the same way I knew that pitch was a strike.
Red, one of the things that's debated most in baseball is foul weather and when you call off a game and who has the right to call off a game and why do you play under such adverse conditions. As I understand it, Red, it's still the rule that the home club can decide to start a ball game or postpone a ball game, but once the game has started, they have no more control over it. Is that right?
That's true, Al. When I was in the American League, the bane of all umpires was the height of a ball, the infield fly, rain, and the lights. You know, you couldn't darkness, I should say, because when you start an inning, you couldn't call it until the other side had completed their turn at bat. So you had to judge how dark it was going to be 25 minutes from now before you call the game. But we forget that. That doesn't concern this night that we were in New York. The Cleveland Club was playing there, and they had a big crowd, and I guess every seat was packed. The stadium was jammed, and DiMaggio hit a home run off fella in about the second inning, and they played about 3.5 innings, and the rains come. I mean a deluge, and the Yankees are ahead 3-0 now. 2 men on base when DiMaggio hit the home run, and we have to suspend play, call time, and we run the Yankee dugout, and we sit there. Bill Summers is the umpire behind the plate. He's running the ball game, and he had broke in with George Weiss, who was running the Yankee Ball Club at that time, and he had umpired in the Eastern League when Weiss owned the Hartford Club, and they were great friends. And here with a packed house, Mr. Weiss doesn't want to lose that money. He doesn't want it to go out the window. He don't want any rain checks. So we wait. We wait half an hour, and Mr. Weiss must have judged that it's about time for the umpire to make a decision, and he wrote a note, sent it down to the dugout, said, "Dear Bill, please don't call this game. We have been in communication with LaGuardia Field, and it's quit out there, and they predicted it will be fair weather here in 15 to 20 minutes." And we didn't stop play. I'm going to go back to playing, and sat there in the rain. And finally, these notes, they keep coming. Don't call the game, don't call the game. LaGuardia says it will quit here. And finally, Summers, about 11:20, he writes George a note. Said, "Dear George, please have your announcer tell the crowd that we're going to continue this game at LaGuardia Airport." This play is called here.